Okay, in this lesson here, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at project management.
Woohoo!
And how can we say this is probably one of the single most important lessons that we will ever introduce in C++ programming?
By far, because when we get into bigger projects, we need to split up our components into separate files.
And if you don't, you're going to get confused
You're going to
real
have
fast.
one file that's going to print out 90,000 pages, and then you're going to try to find something in your book, and, well, it needs a table of contents and page numbers, and an index would probably be helpful.
That's right.
Yes.
But project management will simplify this whole problem, if you will, and it's just smart programming. Period.
And the rules that we'll follow, they're not so much. It's not easy to explain sometimes without going into technical detail.
Right.
But we're going to give you some rules on how to set it up and break it up.
Exactly. So, Joel, if you'd like to tell us first, what exactly are you going to do to illustrate project management?
All right. If you remember from the last VTM, we have our point class, and if we scroll down and try to find it...
And when he says the last VTM, that's Module 2.
Module 2.
Module 2.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm getting tired of all the scrolling.
That's
it takes so long.
That's quite a lot of scrolling, actually.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. Now we are up to our vector class, which inherits from point class.
On line 119.
On line 119, yep.
And look over at the Explorer for a second. How many files do we have over there? How many
One.
CPP? Just one.
Just one CPP file.
Yeah.
So now what we're going to do is divide this up to 4 separate files, plus our already original class.cpp file.
Right.
We're going to have a point.h file, which is the header file, a point.cpp, a vector.h, which is the header file, as I said, and vector.cpp, which is the source file.
You'll notice something here. Yeah, Dan, you're thinking too much like me at the moment.
We're talking programmer speak right now.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
So what exactly is a header?
A header is where everything, this right here. Let's look at this right here. This is where everything is prepared. It's the template, if you will. It's the blueprint, the definition, the blueprint, like we were talking about before.
That will live in another file so that it can be included inside of .cpp files.
Which is the source, where the actual stuff is going to happen.
And if we use the .h file, we can include it in other CPP files,
That's
so
right.
they'll know about.
And that's the key
class.
thing, what you just said. So they'll know about.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's the key thing here.
We can only have one implementation
Of a certain class.
Yes, but we can define it
multiple times
in other classes, sort of.
Yes.
And we'll get into that sort of in a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
So the first thing, let's start off with the point class. That sounds good.
Yeah.
So first thing, let's create our header file. So let's right-click in our Solution Explorer right here. Let's right-click on the header files directory, go to Add, and say Add New Item. So we're going to create a new item. Now, we want to create a header file. So let's click header.h right here, and we'll just name this something like, I don't know, point.h.
That makes logical sense, because
yes,
we're going to be talking about the point class.
So you want to put it in the point.header.h.
Yep.
And it is very important.
Does the name have to match?
It doesn't have to match.
Because you specify.
Yeah, you can specify it.
Right.
But it's always best to name it the same way.
Right.
That comes down to file management again.
Yes, it
and
does.
How
just
easy
being
is it to find
smart. Yeah, exactly.
So let's open this
It's
guy
a
up.
convention.
So now we have our point.h. Now let's go into here and just grab this definition here, which goes all the way to here. So let's just Control X on that guy to cut it.
So we copied it.
We cut it
into the
clipboard
right now.
And now we paste it inside of here.
Control V.
Control V. Yeah, very good, Buzz.
I just one of those students that want to sound smart.
Yeah,
Okay.
great.
Yeah, good.
Oh, good, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You win a cookie.
I want a diet.
So we have our class point definition right here.
And this is what an H file is.
This is what an H file is. It's a definition. So to use this, what we're going to need to do is right inside of here, we're going to say include. Just as we did up here with include IOStream, we're going to include another file, our header file.
Which would be the point.h.
Point.h. So, no, not colon. Point.h.
You'll notice something that Joel did. He used quotation marks.
Yes, this is a very important thing. Why don't you elaborate?
You typically
not too
use
long, though.
quotation marks if it's a header file that you made
right.
and resides in the same directory that you're working in.
Right, so it looks in that directory first, as opposed to the angle brackets.
Which is sort of a system to find. We have different directories which have different header files in them, and it will search out and find them. It's just a convention.
Right, it's a convention thing. It makes it easier to know that this is a standard, some standard header that we have.
That's right. That was supplied by Microsoft for our use.
Yes, and this guy right here was made by ourselves.
Yes, and we're very proud.
Yes,
our
we are.
point.h file. That's right.
Now, if we try to compile this right now, you'll notice that we have sort of kind of a small problem here. Actually, no operator file takes a right-hand operator. Well, here's the thing. If we open this guy up right now, you'll notice that we have it defined here. Mm-hmm. What we need to do at this point is create the actual source file. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah.
So let's go ahead and right-click on our source files here, and let's add a new item again. Okay. This is going to be the point.cpp file, which is where the stuff is going to reside. So point.cpp. Or actually, you just don't need to specify it. I'll automatically put it.
Yeah, that's just the Microsoft convention.
Right.
The .NET convention. It'll fill that in for you.
So inside of our class here, let's go up to the top. And now, let's take all of this right here.
Which would be all the code that is associated with the
These
point
are all
class.
The points functionality.
Yeah, with our operators, our equalities, our accessors, and...
Ooh, break out the fancy language.
Right. Yeah, school words again.
Joel, it's okay.
Okay.
It's okay.
All right. Now, inside of here, right now, the point.cpp file, it's going to try to compile this point.cpp file. Let's actually compile it right now. You're going to notice some problems.
Oh, error.
Error.
Everywhere
is an error. Point is not a class or namespace name. Wait a minute. We defined it. Why can't we use it? Well, because this point.cpp file doesn't know about it.
So do we have to include something?
Yes, we do. Right at the top of our point.cpp file, we're going to say include, just like we did in the other one, point.h. So
now it's aware of it.
So you think it should work, but look at this. There's actually a few problems here. Undefined. Well, what is the cout?
Well, that prints to the console, right?
Right.
So
but it doesn't know about
the console.
Oh, wait, we need to include another header file.
Yes, we do.
Which would be a standard header file.
Called include IOStream.
All right. Which was actually included in our class.cpp.
Yes, but
now we're no longer in that location.
So we need to redefine it again.
That's right. It doesn't magically
appear.
Inherent what's over there in that file.
But the world would be so great if it did.
Yes, wouldn't it be?
But it's programming, so we have to do some things.
Now, we try to compile it again, but it still doesn't know it. And everybody should know why. We need to have the using namespace std.
Oh, yeah.
Dan's favorite thing.
I grew up using some different compilers, and we didn't have to do that in some other compilers.
Yeah.
It just knew cout.
Yeah.
So, here's what we have. Now
Suddenly
we have
a book of errors have dropped down to just 2.
Yep. Now everything should be almost set, but what I'm going to do is kind of decrease this main file here, just so we're dealing with point class.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So point B, and we can just pass it 4, 5, and 6, like we did before.
Yep.
Now let's try to compile this. Look at that.
Hey!
It succeeded.
And the idea of this wasn't to make this confusing as we compiled errors. We're just really showing you how as a beginner, once you start breaking up a file, these are going to be things that you're going to see. You're going to see exactly what you just saw here. And it's really about making each of these files aware of the parts that it needs so that the file really is kind of considered complete.
That's right. And of course, we could have put the source inside of here as well, like we did before. But that's not clean.
We could have, but we're not.
Clean.
Yeah, we're not.
That's not the point.
We're veering off from project management now.
Yeah, that's a bad thing. But there's another thing that we need to be aware of. And if we go into point.h, that is, this header file could be included multiple times.
And we want the ability to include the file in multiple CPP files if we need to.
Right, but so that they could be self-contained.
Yes, but the compiler only needs to see it once.
That's right. And the way we can do this is, actually, I think we talked about this a little bit in the first VTM, preprocessor definitions.
Oh, yes.
And we're going to use one of those called if not defined. So if NDEF. The compiler looks at this and says, if not defined, if what isn't defined, the value, and we can give it any name we want, point_h.
And this tends to be a good convention.
Yes, it is. You can say point, the name of your file, all in uppercase, the dot just is replaced with an underscore, and the H in uppercase as well.
Now, representing the students here.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're confused.
This probably has some people out there confused as to why are you doing this, because you just got it to compile okay.
Yeah.
And everything seems to see one another, so...
Actually, what we'll be able to do is we can see a really good example, I think, when we include the vector class.
Yeah.
Because that will be needing it as well. But we can just finish this up, and then we can comment it out so you can see the problem with it.
We'll get it working, and then we'll break it.
Yeah.
And then we'll get it working again.
Sweet.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
So if not defined. Now, anytime there's any sort of if statement, just like in C++, what do we need to do?
We need to end that if statement.
We need to end that if statement. So at the very end here, end if, right?
Yep.
So simple enough. But if not defined, point.h. So point.h is something that we can define, right?
Yes.
So if point.h is defined, that means all of this is going to be skipped, right?
Right.
Yes.
If it's defined. So where do we define it?
Well, we haven't defined it anywhere yet.
So we should define it inside of the not defined area, right?
That makes sense because then it'll be defined. We'll be able to do it once.
Right.
It'll get defined,
and then
we won't be able to go back in there.
That's right. Again.
So inside of here, we can say define our point, if I can spell, point_h. Simple as that. So that should be everything. And if we compile this again, dink, everything's cool, right?
As a newbie out there, I would almost just suggest this as being a rule.
Yes, consider this a rule.
If you make a header file, make sure you do your if-endf, your define, and your endif
at the end.
And make sure you specify the point_h to be whatever the file name is.
Right.
So we'll do one for vector_h as well.
So come back to class. Now we need our vector.h. So let's come into here, add new item. And we want to add a header file, and this is going to be our vector.h. So we have our vector.h. Now we can switch back over into class.cpp, grab the definition. If I go too fast, just let me know, because I tend to go fast.
Now you're pasting.
So I paste this guy in here. What do we need at the top here, Dan?
We need a rule.
What rule, Buzz?
I don't know. It's probably something very similar that you did a minute ago, where you want to see if it's been defined already, and if it's
don't make me take away the cookie.
No, I'm on a diet. and if it's not, you need to define it, and you need to end all your stuff and things like that.
Okay. So if not defined,
right.
This time it's going to be vector_h. And then we're going to say define vector_h.
That's exactly what I said, man.
Yeah, I know. I could read your mind.
Give me that cookie.
You're on a diet. No cookie for you.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Coffee.
Coffee's okay. All right, so now we've defined that. Now what we need to do is define our CPP file. So let's add a new item into here, a CPP file, and it's going to be our vector. Dink. So now this is empty. So let's go back into our class.cpp file.
So another cut and paste operation going on.
Oh, yeah. All that fancy stuff. And we'll just delete this comment. Comments are bad. No, comments are good.
Do not listen to Joel.
Yeah,
comments
no
are
kidding.
Very good.
He just slipped off planet Earth for a moment.
All right. So inside of here, what we also need is our include what?
Well, we need to see the header file.
So vector.h
is the definition of the class.
Right.
Yeah.
So we include vector.h.
So if we compile this.
So why don't we first use it once quick? So let's say vector C and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay?
Okay.
Now let's try to compile this guy. Wow.
Errors.
Vector, undeclared identifier. I think that means we need an include vector.
I think we would, because we have to be able to understand what a vector is before we use it.
That's right. If we don't know it exists, it won't work. So let's compile this guy.
Oh, we have more errors.
We have more errors. Illegal member initialization.
Oh.
Point is not a base or member.
Well, go back into vector.h for a second.
Check this out. We have point, but does vector know, does this header file know anything about point? Not really.
Right now.
Not right now. So what we need to do is say include what? Point.h.
Yeah.
So now it knows about point.h. So if we compile this guy, bink, everything works great. In fact, we can come back into our class. No, don't save the output build. We can come into here and let's output cout C. And of course we have build operators. Did we actually define this? I do not remember. Does anyone remember, or is it just me?
I thought we did.
I thought we did too. Maybe I was wrong. All right, so let's not worry.
Temporary breakdown.
Temporary breakdown. All right. Now this does compile fine.
If
we look into this, we could debug it. Okay, we'll debug it.
Joel loves to debug.
Yes, I do.
I'm surprised for half a second he considered not doing it.
Yeah.
So we did a c.setx5.
Yes.
Just so we could have something to play with. So let's go into here. All right. Now let's step into this guy right here. We can delete these guys wherever they came from. Go back to our locals so that we can see that x is currently 5, the big one. Now we need to change little x, which is the one inside of us, to 5. dink, and it's already set to 234 just 1 second ago, which means that it was working properly. And we are in our point.cpp file.
Now, Joel, I do have a question for you, because I am more than positive that we did write that function.
Yes, I think you're right.
Did we ever put it as a prototype at the top of the file?
At the top of the header file. That's a good question. So let's go down into our vector.cpp file.
And make sure that we actually define the output functionality. I believe it would actually be in the point class.
Yes, in the point class. Over here.
There
Aha.
it is.
We do have our functions right here.
But let's look at the header file and find out if it's there.
Ooh,
it's not. Because it wasn't part of the class. It was external to the class.
So what we need to do is go copy this guy.
That's right.
Go over into our point.h file, not the bottom here. We'll just say bink.
So at this point, when we include this file, we'll understand what that operator means with a point class.
That's right. So if we come over into class.cpp, let me just get rid of this line since we've done our debugging. Let's see out B. All right? So let's Control-Shift-B this guy. All right. P, undeclared identifier. Well, one of the problems we do have here, actually, what am I looking at?
Oh, the semicolon. No. Der.
Great job there, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.
One other thing, though, if we look at our stream, the stream is an undeclared identifier.
That's right. We're going to have to include that
so we
understand what it is.
So let's include IOStream.
Okay. Now, will we have to use using namespace, or is that not necessary?
We will need to be doing that as well, so let's come into here.
Yay!
And that is going to work. The only reason we got this error is a branch off of the error that we had with the O stream that we have here. So it's like, ooh, we can't find that. Let's complain about this as well, even though that wasn't really a problem.
Yeah, that's just sometimes what compilers do.
Yeah, sometimes what the compiler will do is it will go down linearly. When it reaches an error, everything past that error is going to have some sort of problem as well, just because of the way it reads it.
It's messed up.
Yeah, it's messed up.
So to put things into perspective for the beginner out there that currently just got up and walked away from his computer for a moment,
but
his speaker
to vomit.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I didn't want to say that, but yeah. But his speaker's still turned up, so he can hear us in the bathroom right now.
Yeah.
That's basically, you weren't expecting that.
No.
And go ahead and explain what happened.
All right. So what we had going on here, which part?
We were really just dealing with the point and the vector. Then we shifted our focus back over to the point.
Right. Because what we wanted to do was, if we come back to our class.cpp file, we wanted to be able to say cout p. B.
Right, where we were actually going to see out a point.
That's right. And if we switch over to point.cpp, you'll remember that we did define this.
We did.
And
we had questioned whether or not we had because...
Right. At first I was like, did we not define it?
Because we thought it should have worked.
Right. But the real problem was that we needed to define this in our header file.
That's right.
Which we hadn't done before.
That's the key thing.
So we came back to point.h and said, okay, we need to define it.
And again, I think this is really cool that this is here because, again, it just really goes to drive home the point about once you start breaking everything up into individual CPP files and header files, some of the things that you're going to need to make sure is there in the header file.
That's right. So with that, I want to break it now with our little if.
Oh,
Here's a hammer.
Bam, bam. So what we need to do, let's comment these guys out.
I can't see the code anymore.
Aw.
Because you smashed it with the hammer.
So if we come over here and just comment these guys out, if things go the way I'm thinking they will go, we'll get an error.
Please let it break.
Look at this.
Hooray.
It broke.
Point class redefinition. What? We're only defining it once. How could that be? Well, look at this. In our class.cpp file, we say include point.h. So the compiler says, okay, go to point.h. All right, I'm going to include everything in point.h.
And all that. And that's all cool. But
that's
now
all cool.
Go back to the next thing you
But now I go, ooh, vector.h. Cool. I'm going to go to vector.h. Whoa. It says include point.h again.
Yeah,
wow.
That's a problem.
So we jump back into point.h.
So we go back into point.h.
And then we define everything.
And we try to define.
Wait a second.
Yeah, you can't exactly
do
that.
Do that.
Right.
So that's why if not defined is here and define is here and our end.
And again, as Dan said earlier, just make this a rule.
Make it a rule.
Period.
Yep. Now, one final thing, just to make myself feel better, is I want to take iStream and then take this guy right here, so our input.
Oh, yeah, because that's not in the header file
No,
either.
this isn't in the header file either. So I'm going to put this guy in here, so now we have
Making
the header.
sure that everything is
complete.
non-broken.
Yep. So if we come back to class.cpp, we can say cout B. Whoa. And everything should be almost happy. No operator which takes...
cout B.
Here's the hammer, Joel.
Yeah. Bang, bang. I'll stand in the corner afterwards.
Sweet, that'll look funny.
So now our C and B works, not cout. And if we run this guy, we're in the constructor as we had before.
Waiting for some input.
Let's say 4, 2, and 3. And we output 4, 2, and 3. Everything's working great, right?
I like that.
I like it too. It's cool. So everything... Why do I keep doing that?
I don't know.
Everything is now separated into nice little files, and everything works properly.
And go back to the class.cpp file.
All right.
This is where main exists.
Mm-hmm.
Look how small that is.
Yes.
That's convenient. And if there's a problem anywhere, and
let's say our vector class is messed up.
Actually, everybody just kind of got a taste of that a second ago as you were troubleshooting stuff.
That is true.
You knew exactly where to go
instantly.
You didn't fumble around through a long list of code.
Yeah.
You didn't have to do a find and hunt for something specific. You knew exactly where to go because it was modular.
That's right.
And through project management, that's the whole idea, is to keep it modular like this.
And if you're a person new to, say, .NET or something, you say, well, there's the class view. I can come in here, and it separates all of it for me. Well, you know what? That can only be partially helpful. If you still have a file that's 30,000 lines long, when you try to scroll just a little bit, it's going to become difficult.
And that's still a small program.
And that's still a small program. That's right. So... there.
All right, very cool. I think this was really good, and I definitely love the mistakes in there, because looking at this from a student's point of view, especially after you recapped what happened, I think it makes everything a lot more clear.
I'm human, too.
And mistakes happen.
Yeah.
And mistakes are guaranteed to happen. And so with that, I think we've pretty much covered everything that we wanted to do. And from this point forward, we're now going to start using this, especially with the game.
Yep.
So that's going to wrap up this lesson. Thanks a lot, everyone.